Hello, and welcome to the Forsaken Podcast. I'm Grim Reaper here with Aabahran
Hello.
and Magic.
Hey.
So today we're talking about RP plot, initiations, potentially expectations, some things you may need to know, and a mortal perspective from everybody's favorite dragon. Now, I've never been a part of an RP plot. I've been around them, I've heard of them, I've seen them. I've never actually known what the hell is going on in one. How does an RP plot pop up? How's that start?
Well, there's a few ways to actually get it started. Actually, I should probably mention that Lexi wrote a thing on the forums, and that actually has a lot of good information in it as far as from a player's perspective. There is some stuff like from an immortal perspective on how people start roleplay plots. So, like Lexi said, you can do that with journals or notes, also with just roleplay back and forth between characters. But eventually, I assume you're probably going to need some kind of immortal, oversight or at least help. And at that point, it's really, in my opinion, best to, even before you start the plot, to kind of outline the plot, just a general outline, and then post it on the prayer forum for the immortals to read. And really that way you can at least get a idea of what the immortals can actually do and help with and how far it can go. Or if it makes sense, because sometimes, people have ideas and maybe something they don't know is going on, and so it wouldn't really work. So it's, in my opinion, it's just best to do that first before you really start anything, just to get an idea of where you're at with the immortals. And so, as far as getting involved in the plots, if you're not involved, it depends on the plot, really. Some plots are all player driven, and so unless you talk to one of the players involved in the plots and they try to get you involved, which is kind of the responsibility of whoever's running that plot, or if they need help from the immortals to do that, to push that, you kind of need to talk to whoever that is. But there are certain plots where the world is changing. The Valmiran plot is one that it was changing all the time. In fact, I think even today there's still some stuff that has changed that needs to be cleaned up around the game, because we just changed so much stuff. It was hard to actually keep up with at one point. And so in that case of that type of plot, you would basically walk around and look or talk to people involved. And I know that we were making changes on a weekly basis, so things would change, and you just kind of had to react from those changes, and you had to pay attention, because they could be big changes or they could be subtle changes. But I mean, a lot of the times, like for instance, there was a rat man army outside of the gates of Valmiran on the western side, and it's like, so what's the rat folks doing there? Obviously there was a rat man at the time. I can't even think of his name at the moment. I'm sorry, HSM. Yeah, Kelmy. So there was Kelmy at the time. So obviously Kelmy was the one running this plot, or at least this portion of the plot. So I guess you would have to talk to him, try to get involved somehow, or if you felt like his army and you needed to oppose it, then you basically write your own role play. And like Lexi said, you can either do that via journals, notes, or maybe you could. Sometimes we would have people post prayer things on the forums, just saying, hey, look, this is kind of the direction I want to go and how I want to combat what's going on, and then get it started that way. And then we'd basically say, hey, okay, write some notes and journals so we can keep track of this kind of stuff. So that's, at least from like an immortal perspective. I would definitely, like I said, read the post that Lexi posted, because I thought it was pretty good.
How do you mediate everybody's, like, okay, say you have like 10 different people want to do 10 different things at once revolving around one plot. How do you mediate that as an immortal?
Well, basically, we just have conversations as immortals, and but at the time of the Valmiran plot, only Anume had access to actually alter production, or the main FL instance, I guess you would call it. And so any changes basically she had to do as far as OLC is concerned. And we didn't really have any code changes that I can remember. I think there was maybe one or two just for like ambiance, some of the echoes that were going on in Valmiran at the time. But otherwise, everything was done OLC wise. And so,
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say echoes and whatnot can be done via OLC.
Yeah, they can, but there was something special about this particular case, and I don't remember specifically what it was. But basically, we just talk about it, and we try to keep track of all the changes. At the time, I was reading every single thing that came through, and so I had a good idea about exactly what was going on. And Anume also read the stuff, and we were having conversations back and forth. And we would just remind each other if something needed to be put in, is basically the way they would do it. And Anume and I would try to be on at the same time, and then I would write descriptions, she would write descriptions, and she would put them in. And, that's basically how it went for that plot. So I would assume any kind of immortal interaction that you're going to have in the plot, whether that's OLC or just general, kind of interaction with immortals in general, is just going to be, we're just going to have to talk about it and figure it out. And a lot of times people don't obviously like what they get, but I think you got to expect that it won't always go as expected.
Right. Do immortals ever roll up mortal characters to help drive or stir a plot up?
In the past,
I don't know if they've actually ever created an immortal specifically for the plot, because they can always, drive the plot through switches and echoes and whatnot. Well, they might have a character involved in the plot or get involved that they've already got in there, but I don't think they've actually created any to specifically drive a plot or help drive a plot.
Well, I would say I think I can think of an instance where an immortal did create a character not to drive the plot, but to reinvigorate the plot, maybe, or just be a part of it in general, not specifically just trying to actually do anything with the plot other than be a part of it and kind of drive it a little bit. But typically, yeah, we can do that with the immortal character to to get some more interest in the whole plot. But I think I can think of at least one where someone created a character specifically to revive the plot and get involved, but I can't think of what character it was, though.
Reviving a plot is almost creating its own plot after the fact anyway. I mean, take a look at
True. It I think what happens then, and it's kind of cool actually, because it is kind of taking the plot in a completely different direction whenever someone else gets involved and the original characters are kind of gone. So
it happens a lot.
It does, and it's unfortunate. And that's one of the big struggles with player-driven plots, is because, and I think Kaisarius, or however you say his damn name, his vampire character had a plot going, and I think that there was some struggle a little bit, not real bad, but a little bit, because characters that you put all this, you're expecting them to help you out and do this, and they're committed to it, and then they die and they delete, or they get pissed off about something. Maybe it's something the immortals did, or what, for whatever reason they get pissed off and they delete, or they just, life gets in the way and they don't have time, and that they just kind of fall off and die, and it can really like kill a plot. It can stall it. And so, yeah, there's got to be some expectation there that these types of things are going to happen. So not to rely on one person necessarily too much. So
Yeah, that's a big issue. That's why I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea for an immortal to have not necessarily a main character in a plot, but one to be kind of like the messenger, the straw that stirs the drink, if you will.
Well, kind of. I mean, in the end, what you want to do is you want to have a plot that you're going to finish, which means creating a plot not to inject more fun into a character, because if you're not having fun in a character, you're not going to finish it. And don't rely on specific people too much, or have a way to shift their responsibilities over to somebody else easily, like what happened with Kazera's character. People dropped off. He could have then put their responsibilities on somebody else that happened to be in or nearby. But unfortunately, I think he relied too much on his own cabal. And if there's nobody in the cabal, there's nobody to pass the baton to.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. I will say his plot did eventually come to fruition, and I felt like it worked out well. I think he got what he wanted out of it overall. So I can say that's at least a good thing. But yeah, a lot of it did kind of involve his cabal members. So
yeah, I think with that too is it ultimately didn't matter what the other people did as much, because he could always top it up himself, as it were.
yeah. And one thing that Lexi pointed out was not just dealing with members, people that you might get along with. She mentioned one of her characters and how she learned maybe a lot about that character through actually dealing and having role play with evil characters on the other side of the spectrum. And this was her goody character. So she said that helped her, drive whatever she was doing as far as her character was concerned. So, you got to be open to work with maybe your enemies or to get them involved somehow, even in a, antagonist role for your plot. But, obviously you have to use some judgment there. You don't want to ruin your plot, dealing, telling your arch enemy, hey, this is my plot. That way you can defeat it. You know what I mean?
It's almost like your enemies and conflict drive a good story.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily ever anyone's plot, right? Like, it's kind of the game's plot in a way. Like, are our characters not contributions to the game? Are we not offering our, our storylines into the game and, like, interweaving it and kind of working together as a community of really kind of low-key, like, improv actors in a way is what it feels like at times.
Well, we're all characters in an overarching story, yes, but I think that's pretty much all we are is mainly story rather than plot. Is kind of a misnomer in that regard.
Yeah, well, it's because we kind of steer, like, the story never ends, so at times it's in, I guess, a state of resolution or something, and then something arises, and, there's a new plot, so it has the whole, the story arch that goes on. We all just kind of weave our piece into it and try to make it all fit, and it feels like a giant quilt. We're all just knitters. We're all old women. We sit on our front porches daily, and we sit in our rocking chairs with our what are those things they used to knit with? Whatever, those little sticks.
Needles? The sewing needles?
Yeah, we're just, and the sticks are like our keyboards, and the yarn is our ideas. And the quilt is our friendship.
You heard it here, folks. Grim trying to be metaphorical. Dying horribly. This is a common thing with them.
Yeah, for sure. The best plots are plots that involve other players and immortals, if possible. I would say.
I like the idea of mortals driven plots. Like I wouldn't like I don't I mean I personally wouldn't be upset if an immortal came on and was like, I have a plot, this is gonna go down like this, like it's already kind of preordained or something.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a tricky situation because you want to make players feel like they have some kind of impact. And if you already have a predestined, you want to have an ending, right? But you need to be flexible in that ending, because if you are so rigid, then it feels like no matter what players do, it doesn't matter. It's
Right.
going to go the way it's going to go, right? So you got to be
Well,
flexible in that, even as an immortal, I think.
well, as an immortal, okay, like if an immortal had an idea, whatever, like already have a preordained, like it could end this way, it could end this way, or it could end this way. Maybe the evil ending, the good ending, and the neutral ending.
Yeah, well, I could tell you from this, just from personal experience, it doesn't matter how many ways you think it could go. Someone is going to throw a wrench in those plans, no matter what you do. And I think you just have to be flexible and roll with whatever it goes. And the end is the end, and hopefully it's somewhat what you wanted
Yeah.
or expected or thought it might be. And if not, maybe it's not a bad thing, but whenever you spend a lot of time on something and thought, like on a plot, it can be discouraging whenever it doesn't go your way. But you really got to tell yourself that, it's good. I mean, it's good for the game, so it's good for everybody, no matter which way it went.
Yeah, I mean, the good part, what makes it good is the fun of just being involved, at all. Even if it doesn't work out how I wanted it to work out or how I tried to make it work out, just kind of happy to be there kind of thing.
Yeah.
And in some cases, you can shoehorn yourself into somebody else's story, and that's not a problem. Sometimes they'll come to you. Sometimes you can come to them. Kind of depends. If we're going to use Kaiser's plot as an example, you really couldn't shoehorn yourself into it very much because nobody knew what was going on. But
Yeah,
if
but
you
That's a
look
big
at,
thing.
yes, kind of. I mean, you have the major players, and some people in certain areas, if you're in there, could get into it. For example, what his was the whole long night type thing. So if you
yeah,
were in Syndicate, you could shoehorn yourself in. If you were in Night, you kind of could shoehorn yourself in. If you were anybody else, it would be a little more difficult.
yeah. I think it kind of depends. So the whole thing with his plot was to get the everlasting night or whatever it is, right? So the thing about it is that could have died before it even got started, really. I mean, if he had told the wrong person, if he had gotten involved with the wrong person, then it could have easily, for instance, I mean, he might have had a neutral merchant that he was working with, and the merchant just so happened to tell the knight, hey, by the way, this guy over here is trying to get this eternal night, and obviously I don't agree with it, so, let's do something about it. He could, play both sides. Now, that's kind of going against your cabal mate, and there might be some consequences to that, but not all cabal mates agree. Which is, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, I think that controversy is good, but I mean, if he had the way that plot went, if he had involved more people, then it may have never even come to fruition. So I think the good part is it did. And then everyone saw, hey, it's Eternal Night, and then it gets all the other characters involved. So I would just say that's a phased approach to that plot where this has to happen, and I'm going to make this happen, and then we can get all the reactions. So sometimes maybe it's not such a bad thing that it's kind of kept between a few people, at least at first. Because there was some things in the Valmiran plot that no one ever knew about. They never knew that who started the. There was I think if I recall correctly, there was 3 portals where demons were pouring out of, right? And no one ever really knew who started them or what they were there for or anything of that nature. Well, my character started them, and I started them as a distraction to distract people from what we were actually trying to do, which was take over Miravor. And there were actually 3 of them, and they were in various locations for very specific reasons. But I didn't want to tell anyone that as my character, because that was just the way my character was. He was very secretive. He didn't want anyone knowing that he was involved at all, even though it was probably pretty blatantly obvious because he was the leader of Nexus. And so, it's unfortunate, and I think some people got upset because they never really did know what was going on with them. But at the same time, they had their purpose, they had their reason, and I think even more so they're upset because they didn't know how to stop them. But that's just using your imagination. So a lot of stuff with the plots is using your imagination to combat whatever's going on. I mean, for instance, how do you think you would close a portal?
I would get go to Brambis, have him create a water cannon, and I would fill it with holy water, and I would blast those sons of bitches.
See, that could work, and that could have closed the gate, and you could have gone through and tried to do another one or two, but nobody came up with any way to close it. In fact, didn't another character claim it as he did it?
Yeah. Serval, the undead warrior who was royal of Mirrorvor, eventually after Erithil left Nexus, he actually claimed those as his own. And the way that Erithil opened it is because he was the Archfiend of Nexus. So you would think the Archfiend, being that they deal with demons and things like that, would be the one who would open the portals that Nexus was pouring, or these demons were pouring out of, right? So then Erithil left Nexus, and Serval, I hope I'm saying his name right, he basically... he took them over as he became Archfiend, and then he did whatever he wanted with them. But it's just limited by your imagination. Is it necessarily 100% going to work? You could go to Brambis and have him create this giant holy water blasting cannon. That doesn't mean that it's going to work, but at least it's a good idea. And I'll tell you, if it is a good idea and we look at it and say, hey, that was a good idea, let's make it close the portal. I mean, that's kind of, I guess at that point it's up for you to convince the immortals we were kind of driving this plot in the sense of making all the changes, and people would basically, they'd say, hey, these are the changes that I want to do this week. I want to move this army, or I want to knock down this gate, or, whichever. And we would be like, well, you can't do that because of this reason, or you can't do that because of this reason, or that works, you can do that. So that's something that we had to decide as immortals, and basically that would be the decision. Is your idea, does it work? Does it make sense to take down this portal? And so, yeah, it's just limited to your imagination. Is it always going to work? No, but it could. And I think people just got stuck on, I don't know how to close it, instead of just coming up with creative ideas on how to do it.
Yeah, if I were involved, it would have definitely been the Brambis water gun attempt.
The characters I had on at the time didn't really give a shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some people don't, and but it was a lot of fun. I can tell you that. It was probably one of the most fun I've had on the mud. I call it the mud. My wife yells at me for that, but I don't know why either, because she just
what the hell
yell at me.
Who does?
I'm sorry, say again?
Who wants to yell at you?
I'm just saying, whenever I call it the mud instead of mud,
It is the mud.
My wife seems to get agitated by that. I don't know
why.
On
mud?
I just said I don't know why.
Well, she's wrong. She's wrong.
Maybe because she thinks that there are multiple muds out there that are actually worth the damn it, rather than having Forsaken Lands as the mud.
Okay, she definitely doesn't know about.
Yeah. She definitely doesn't know anything about muds in general.
Does she know what it stands for?
No. I've explained it to her, but she kind of just glazes over and looks at her phone, so she doesn't give a shit.
Okay. Well, then why does she give a shit what you call it?
I don't know. I just told you that. I have no clue. She just does. Every time I say the mud, she goes, just stop calling it that. Call it mud. I'm like, okay, chill out, lady.
Well,
Welcome to the marriage counseling section of our program.
Yeah.
Well, the problem with that is you can't do that. I'm
can't
going
do
to
what?
play the multi-user dungeon. I'm not going to go. I'm going to play mud.
Well, I've always referred it in the
It doesn't
past to mud, and I guess recently I've started calling it the mud, and I don't know. It just is what it is.
Historical context.
Yeah.
I see how it is.
And we've completely got off topic now.
Yeah,
so.
yes, we have. Okay, main points is have a start, have an end, have a loose middle, maybe some key points that can't change, but maybe can later on. Get people involved, but don't rely on them too heavily. Immortal involvement is critical, and things might not go the way you want to. Have fun.
Yeah, just be flexible and definitely try to have fun. I mean, if mud is not fun, then yeah, you probably shouldn't be playing it, or you should maybe you should look at why it's not fun and try to figure that out.
Yeah.
That whole Valmiran plot, I will say, I know you said it was fun. I found myself just confused, lost, and I didn't have fun during that plot at all.
Yeah, I mean, if you're confused or lost, I mean, did you say something to anyone? I mean, did you try to get involved or what?
I mean, I was getting involved when I could because there's like the whole Rygothran thing jumping out of the fucking ground and looking for a scale and all that. Nobody's figuring a scale out, and I was like, okay, cool, it's a musical scale. I'll run with that, and that didn't go anywhere. I don't even know if anybody.
Well, that kind of that with the scale thing. That started out as a joke. I had created my history, and and Anume knew I was gonna be the greed dragon, and so she felt like it would be fun, or at least she jokingly said, I don't think she was serious about it, but she jokingly said, you should have like one gold scale, and it broke off, and that's what you're freaking out about. Kind of like this prissy. My golden scale's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
looking for the equivalent of looking for your earring or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, you know what, my character,
your favorite earring.
Yeah, while he's supposed to be a dragon and immortal and scary, I wanted him to have a mischievous and a fun side, and to be able to kind of screw around, because I felt like, as for my own sanity, playing a character that I could kind of be, I don't have to be serious 100% of the time, would be good for longevity. And so that's why I ran with the scale.
Why'd you bitch slap my dick? Because I RP'd. I was a herald at the time, and I RP'd. I found this like ancient ass tome and found out this like dragon scale. It's like, oh shit, what are these? These dragon notes for whatever ancient sorcery used to calm dragons or whatever. And I found it, and I was like, that's the scale. It all clicked. And I was like, that's the golden scale. Oh my god, and I went with that, and then.
Yeah, well, the problem with that is we had an absolute. We knew where the scale was at. I mean, the Immortals knew where the scale was at, and until you hit those right buttons and you found out the scale, it just wasn't going to happen. And eventually, no one did, and so that's why we kind of screwed up, and we should have been a little more flexible on that. But basically, what had happened was the Gold Dragon had it the whole time, and no one ever really tried to get to the Gold Dragon or confront the Gold Dragon, because the Gold Dragon was hidden because he closed the door off to that temple because he was afraid of Rygothran or whatever, and so he basically had the scale the whole time, and all someone had to do was basically try to approach him, figure out some kind of creative way to get his attention and get the scale from him. But and people did a lot of funny stuff with that little scale plot. It was let's see, I want to say it was Donovan, that undead tribune at the time. He had there's a thief, I think, in Merchant, and he had the thief and Merchant counterfeit create a scale, and then he tried to give it to me, like a counterfeit scale. And
that's dangerous, giving a counterfeit scale to the Golden Dragon.
But it's actually kind of clever in a way, because
it was,
it could pay off.
It was for sure. It was fun. There are a few little things that happened from that, and unfortunately, it got to the point where, and like I said, this is I think my fault and the fault of some of the other staff members is just that it gets to a point where things become stale. Whenever there's no movement in something, people kind of lose interest, and that's understandable. And so at that point, we probably should have, done something, but we just kind of left it there, and we just kind of left it alone. And every once in a while, my character would bitch that he didn't have a scale, and that was kind of it. It wasn't something that we really drove, and so eventually, the way that we tied that up was Taliesin, a character in Watcher, yeah, basically wanted me out of Watcher because, well, having a greed dragon and Watcher kind of wasn't really what they wanted. We'll just put it that way. And so basically, we kind of arranged a way for him to get the scale. Like I think maybe one of the Gold Dragon Knights talked to him or something. I don't remember specifically what we did, but eventually he got the scale. And then he offered the scale to me in exchange for me leaving Watcher, and that's eventually why I left Watcher as the immortal. But yeah,
wow, that sounds kind of anticlimactic.
It was, but I mean, it just like I said, it was just something that we didn't do right, in my opinion. We could have done better, but it was just kind of a little sub mini plot. It wasn't anything big or serious. It was never meant to be.
Yeah. It sucks. I thought I'd knocked it out of the park with the musical scale thing. I was like, oh, they're gonna like that, but nah. And I was like, you know what, fuck this.
Yeah, I just thought that was cheesy as hell.
How is that cheesy? That's fucking borderline genius. That's fucking genius level thinking.
Yeah, it might be cheesy, but it's innovative. I mean, it's different.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, it is. It is different in certain ways.
I mean, a medieval fantasy game is cheesy in general, like all of it is cheesy. And this is just, like, let's not even pretend we're playing, swords and sorcery and all that stuff. Like that's cheesy.
I mean, okay, looking at it in hindsight is, hindsight's 2020. But I mean, you could have had that musical scale summon or otherwise create a golden scale, literal golden scale to give back to
right. You. Yeah. Yeah, it makes it glow, and it's like, it's like, something like that.
True, but you got to also understand my character can be a prissy bitch, and to be honest, he didn't want any kind of created scale. He wanted his scale. Okay? He wanted his scale.
Okay. Well, it could have been one of those things to where it was then summoned or recreated the same scale. I mean, all it is.
It wouldn't be the same at that point, now would it?
No, because now you're sitting there putting sentimental value onto it. Which, granted, greed, the god of greed, but
that's the whole point, though, was that it was his scale and it was gone, and he wanted his scale back.
You're still taking the one side rather than the other, so it could have been someone from the dragon itself, and oh no, where'd the scale go? And I've got it now, ha 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 ha, because I found the golden scale.
True, yeah, of course, you could have made it work, of course, but it didn't work, right? Like I said, we had this rigid idea of how you could get the scale, and if you didn't do all the right things, or if you didn't talk to the right people, then it just wasn't going to happen. And I admit, hindsight, that maybe wasn't the best approach, and is not the best approach when dealing with plots, because you can't have absolutes. You have to be flexible.
Yeah, that's what you were saying earlier in the podcast, is that the importance of flexibility. And this is an example of why rigidity is a killer.
I agree. And also, I mean, part of that also could have been that it would have been, and I don't know when you actually did that, but if for instance, if one day I lose the scale, and then the next day someone comes up with the best reasoning to find it, that kind of kills that. I mean,
it does.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
no,
it's like, that was
sure.
great, it lasted a fucking day. Pardon my French, but we'll have to cut that part out. Sorry, folks.
What the hell are you talking about? I said it already. Hey,
okay.
because my musical scale idea that came in, that was late game. That came in because you had already been flying around,
Okay.
breathing lightning forever, and I was like, dude, when is this? Like, I came up with that because it's like, well, nobody's figured it out. So I mean, let me think and let me see if I can wrap this up, you know. And I thought about it. I was like, oh, that'll be cool. I bet they'll like that.
Yeah, see, at that point, it would be
so
fine. And that's great. But as Rigo just said, if it was like day 2, it's like,
Sure.
dude, how about if we sit on this? Even if you talk to the players, like, how about if we sit on this? This is a great idea, and we'll probably use that unless something comes up better.
Sure.
Yeah, that's that's kind of it's kind of immersion killing if you were to do that. So it's I don't know. It's a difficult situation. I think just that there's no good answer for that, because I think people get so excited and they want to figure it out, but it's not. It was never meant to be like a wham bam thank you ma'am type situation. It was kind of meant to draw out a little bit at least. It just got drug out too long.
Well, yeah. And we go back to actually what one of the points that Lexi brought up was pacing. Too quick is not fun for anybody, and too long again isn't great for anybody. So you've got to find that happy balance between bringing out the right things at the right times and keeping it going, and not letting it go on too long.
Yeah. I think there is some kind of balance that you definitely need to find for sure. Excuse me.
How long do you think a good plot should be? I mean, because
it depends on the scope. To be honest with you,
let's go back to the Eternal Night one right now. One of my characters was involved in that a little bit. It wasn't a large one, but he was there for the beginning. And what I did with that was there was this. Well, it might give away the character for some people, but at this point, I don't give a shit. There was this book that was to be had, and it was found, or this ritual that needed to be found, and my character found it. And so what he did was he just gave them pieces at a time, and just kind of fed them that way. And it wasn't very long. It was like I think and it ended up being like 3 parts, and it was like 1 week, here's a part. The second week, here's another part. The third week, just keep it driving a little bit going and keep it coming in intervals.
Yeah,
and then once my part was done, it was done.
And just don't be an asshole and give away his character if you know who that is. just gonna say that.
What?
I'm just saying, if you know the situation, don't give away the character. I mean, just keep it to yourself.
Me?
Yes.
I'm saying anyone in general who listens to this podcast.
Oh.
Who knows my character right now? My active character, by the way.
I don't even know you played.
So, you say that every time. I swear. More than one. Okay, the last time you said it, I'm still playing that character. How about that?
Are you serious?
Yes. Yes, I am.
I was under the impression that you hadn't played in like years, and you were just kind of like a wise old,
wise old sage.
Yeah, you're like the Gandalf of.
I have the sage wisdom.
Yeah.
No, you said it several times over the past, and what I said last time was I've had a character off and on since 2011. And by off and on, I mean one character or another since 2011. Not all of them long-lived, but I've always had an active character since then.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I was under the impression that you didn't play.
No, dude, I keep telling you I play.
Oh. Well, I guess I keep forgetting. Excuse me.
Why do you think I have such intimate knowledge of some of these actual characters going on? Because I interacted with them.
Okay.
Yeah. There we go. Bazinga. Or something.
Or something.
Bazinga, that's what's getting edited out. That's getting cut.
You're getting cut.
Hey.
You're all cut.
Yeah, you're cut. You're cut. You're cut. No, you're definitely cut. Oh. Hey, seriously though, on a serious note, events as opposed to plots.
Events as opposed to plots.
Think about that. Just let that mull over in your lobes right now. Think about that.
Yeah.
What is an event?
What is that? Literally anything.
Okay.
I would say
Magic's getting it.
I would say an event is like a predetermined thing that's going to happen, and it's going to happen whether you're involved or not. Such as Rygothrine coming out of the ground. That was more an event than it was part of that plot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rygothrin's grand coming out.
Or the tower. Whenever recently the tower landed in basically the trash pile. Because
okay.
You heard it here, folks. Rygothrine came out of the closet.
He came out.
He came
Blocked
out.
away. Blocked away for years. He came out to show his glorious blue things. He's like, hey!
Yeah, events form plots. Events form stories.
Do you guys remember a long time ago when I remember this very, very distinctly. This is when I kind of first started playing. They took Adeptus out of gear, and he was like just running amok, just in the lands. You know, like he was in Miravor at one point, and I remember being like, "Holy crap!" And all these people were forming together to try to take him down.
Was it Raiden at that point?
Yeah, definitely. This is way before Maelstrom. I thought that was cool, you know, and that's kind of an event, is what I would call it, because it happened just kind of randomly, quickly, just, you know, like an Immortals on. You know what? I'm gonna do something fun for the people that are on right now. You know, I think that'd be cool, like stuff like that, just little one shots, if you will. They can happen just for, you know, if an Immortal logs on and there's like 15 people online, do something for them, you know?
Now that would be an event.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. You know, just like you happen to see a bunch of people on, if there's like 10 or more people on, maybe hop on there and be like,
Well, yeah, and some things like that have happened in the past. For example, I don't know what spawned it off, but there was 2 instances when I was on Urus that did basically that. One was there was a swine explosion. There were pigs literally all over the castle and all out the front doors. So hundreds of these things. It was just ungodly. And the other one was when he got his title, actually. Rift opened up, the world was destroyed. Anum brought everybody that was logged in at the time to this room, and we all had this huge event story type deal. And it was great. So it's not like they don't happen often, or they don't even have to happen with a whole bunch of people on at the same time. But it could end up being to where everybody that's online is then involved.
Yeah, I think
how things are progressing.
I think the best way to do these events is to post on forums and say, hey, look, this is the time that we're doing this event. And that way, if people are able, they can, you know, be involved in it. Because sometimes we've had situations where we're like, okay, we need to do something, let's do an event, and then like it just kind of on a whim we do it, and it's like we'll post on the forums, hey, in an hour we're going to be doing this, and I don't really think that's enough time. And surprisingly, we have got decent results, but there's some players that kind of wish that we would have given a little more advance notice. And sometimes I think that's a good thing, and then sometimes I think you really just need to kind of run with it as far as these little events are concerned anyways.
Okay, so in that regard, there's 3 different types of events. There is the scheduled, there's the semi-scheduled, and then there's the unscheduled. The unscheduled would be like the ones I was just referring to. The semi-scheduled, which was ones that you were just referring to, and then we have actual scheduled events where we go 3 weeks from now. Something's going to happen at this time. Log in.
And I think we should do all of these while Wade is asleep. No.
That's just rubbing his salt into his wound.
Sorry, Wade. Yeah. So.
Sorry. What?
Yeah, you're right. We got 3 different types, I guess.
So yeah, I mean it, and people can suggest. I'm assuming they can suggest these types of events, but this doesn't necessarily mean that it will happen.
Yeah.
Because again, it's one-off. It requires and it could be completely unfeasible.
Yeah, it's really nice whenever you have multiple Immortals on to be able to do echoes. it can get a little convoluted whenever it's one person doing these little events versus like 3 or 4 immortals that can do echoes.
Oh God, yeah. Let's take the coordination of Sylph, for example. That little event. That was more of a scheduled event, kind of, and Anum was the only one on, and she was performing the ceremony, and she was going back to the castle to blow up the castle walls, and going back and forth between all that, and it was a lot on her, and she did phenomenally well. But it's still a lot for the one person to do.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot. There was a mini event recently with the deaf characters, and I think Anume was the only one involved in that. As far as the conclusion of it, whenever the tower, whenever she made it into a little tiny tower and put it in her little room, I think that she was the only one on. I could be wrong though.
Is that event over?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Tower?
What?
Is that over? The Champions of Death?
Yes.
It concluded with her snatching up the tower.
Mm.
That was kind of the end of that little mini plot there that had to do with some of the Champions of Death. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that was one of those things to where unless you were involved, and anybody could have been involved because she announced it, and she was like basically send in your applications. But outside of those people, nobody knew what was going on because they weren't supposed to know.
Yeah, that was just basically if you looked around, well, I would say there were some of those death members that were pretty loud about it. And if you were to look around, you could kind of see that things were out of sorts.
Oh hell! It's only recently, literally recently, and we're talking after the tower had landed, that I found one of those rooms they were talking about.
Yeah, one of those rooms. There's 3 of them, because there was 3 phases to that little plot, and it was kind of cool how it all went down. But there's 3 phases, and so each phase had a room, and and different things were required. And if you find the room, you should really read the description, because in the descriptions, it almost kind of alludes to what was required to get it to that point. It was pretty cool the way that she did that with the rooms.
I know one of the things on there, for example, was they needed to bring something that was black and white, and various people brought something that was black and white, and it's, if you know who was there, and it's going to be harder as time goes on to know that, but if you know who was in the plot and you read the description, you can almost pick out who brought what.
Yeah, you would have to. I think 1 or 2 people, 1 or 2 of the champions were pretty out there as far as they weren't secretive or quiet about that they were a champion, and then there was a few. There was maybe a couple that you had no clue that they were until it kind of came out.
Yeah.
So.
And even then, I think there was 1 or 2 that. Or 1, well, because there's 3 champions, right? there was 1.
In the end, there was 3 champions, yeah, but there was more to begin with.
Yeah, well, yeah, there are candidates, yeah.
Yeah, there was actually I think it was until like the very last phase, there was more than 3.
Right.
So, and then in the last phase, it was just a 3. So. But yeah, it was interesting, but it was like one of those plots that didn't involve. It wasn't like a global plot. It was more just like a few characters. So, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing.
I mean, you don't have to have a plot that's globally reaching. You could have it extremely isolated.
Yeah.
Because if you get a global plot that's happening monthly, it does kind of tend to water down the global plots. It's like, oh, we're coming up to another one.
Yeah, I think it would be cool to have large scale plots going on, And then I think it would be cool to have smaller scale plots and then also events, I think all kind of going on. The problem is, it just goes back to volunteer staff and time, things like that.
Yeah.
But it would be cool. And I think it would kind of every time players are coming back to play, things are happening. And I think whenever things are happening, there's excitement. And I think it could do nothing but good, really.
So here's the question then, as we're talking about this whole thing, as your opinion, because I know you can't speak for the staff in general, the three types of events that go on the single day, basically the mini events. You've got the medium scale ones, which I guess the one that Anum was running with the tower kind of qualifies, and then you've got the large global plots, which would include stuff like the Valmiran plot and the long night plot, as it were. How often do you think each of those, ballpark wise, should they happen? Like
That's
do you
a good
think a global
question.
plot should be like once every 6 months, and maybe a mini plot happen once every 3 to 4, that type of deal?
Yeah, I think like quarterly you could have like a like a medium scale plot, and then like biannual you have like maybe a major plot, or maybe even once a year, depending on how major it is, because I think Valmiran spanned months.
Now, is that biannual twice a year or once every 2?
Twice a year.
Just making sure, because there are 2 ways to look at that.
Twice a year.
Twice a year.
Semi-annual is also a way to say it, I think.
That would be, yes, unambiguous.
But yeah, biannual, twice a year. I think it would be cool. But like I said, maybe not, because the Valmiran plot, like I said, spanned months of time. It was a lot of stuff, and to do that twice a year could be a lot of work.
You got to have the prep time. You got to have enough prep time and really flesh out like all the potentials that could go involved in it, and really have like a really solid foundation before even introducing a plot into the world, so that way it can be more streamlined, I would think.
And I think that one thing that heralds could get involved in, since everyone seems to think that they're pretty useless, is that they could document these plots. Now, the problem is heralds probably don't really exactly know everything that's going on. So I can see kind of like how that is not going for them, but at least they can document what they see and then write it up, so people, and then put it in the history or the tomes. And then also on the same token, I think that the immortals, or someone who's like a front runner in the plot, a main character, if you will, I think that we should be kind of writing a synopsis, maybe some kind of story, or some kind of literature about the plot, whatever's happening in the plot, how it went, who was involved, what happened, all of the little facets, not going necessarily into like the great detail, but just an overall story arc of what happened with the plot and how it affected this and that and the other. And I think that would probably be a good idea, because a lot of people weren't involved in Valmiran, whether they just didn't know how to get involved, or they just, whatever they did, they didn't get involved, or they just weren't playing at the time, and they hear about it and they don't actually know what happened. And I think that would be good. And people have said that that we should write a story about that, or something, not necessarily a story, but just write that out exactly what happened. Because I feel like it's a big part of FL's history as far as that time frame was concerned.
Yeah, you can have 2 ways to do that. I mean, you can write out a very brief synopsis and have it in a tome or 2 in the library in game, but then write out something a little bit more, and for that you could submit it to me and I'll put it up on the wiki. I mean, we haven't had anything like that posted as far as FL's history for literal years. So that would be good.
I'm gonna try to do that, bearing in mind that it was how many years ago? 3, I think. It was 2016 whenever we did that. So I'm gonna try to do that. So there may be some details that are either hazy or I just forgot. So I might have to. People might call me out and say, "Hey, this is not how it went." So that may happen.
Now, as far as that's concerned, for anybody listening that wants to write something up for it, or maybe they were part of the plot or started off themselves, like Kaiseris, for example. For the wiki, try to keep track of the in-game dates, because that way it can just be applied to the wiki a little bit easier. And for yours, Rigo, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but we can always put an approximation in there.
Yeah,
between this century and this century.
Yeah, that's going to definitely be difficult, but we'll see. We can maybe try to figure something out.
Well, because if it was like 3 years ago, that was like 200 years in game time or something like that. So you can still approximate.
Yeah. And try to figure it out. I mean, wait, hold on. Excuse me. Did they not have like a birth date? Isn't there? Is it in bio maybe?
For the in-game date, it's time.
Like the creation date, if you will. Like, do you not have like a creation date of your character?
Oh yeah. You might actually see it in bio. Yes.
Yeah, mine doesn't show anything in bio. That's interesting. As an immortal.
Well, no. You know what? It might just be. Oh hell, where did I see it? You know what? Try new score. Or
no, it's the old score, I think.
Score.
The new score doesn't have it. Let's see.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Type in auto score and check your old score sheet.
Okay, let's see here. My character's kind of old. 300.
So yeah, one year in game time is about 120 years. So you would have been about 360, 400 years ago, and me putting it on the wiki for that, I could just sit there and say this time frame, because this is what 2300 in game now. So yeah, 1900 to 2000, for example. I could put that in there for the wiki.
Yeah, actually, the old score doesn't even show it. I thought
there was some place that did. I don't remember where it is.
Yeah, I thought there was some place.
It should be somewhere.
Maybe the players know. If you know, let me know. So.
Somebody mentioned one time that it would be cool if, like, on the message of the day or something, like if there's an RP plot going on or event or something like that, maybe on the message of the day of the mud, kind of update little tidbits of like, hey, this happened or this happened, just to keep people posted. Because one of the issues I had is I would have, I didn't even know where to jump in on the whole thing because I really had no idea what the hell was going on a lot of the time. So I kind of just stayed away from it, in total because I didn't know where to jump in. I really just, it was hard.
Yeah, and I think at that time we were being, I don't want to say we were being vague, but if people were asking what was going on, we would, because there's so much going on in Valmiran and around Valmiran. I mean, there was armies at the gates, there was armies inside, there was like
portals everywhere.
There was portals. There was all kinds of like, there's undead going into the Fort Blackwatch and killing people, or killing knights, because there was a knight encampment in Fort Blackwatch, which is still there. And there was a ton of stuff going on. So really, you just got to get out there and look sometimes. But I think we could do a better job at least giving some direction or pointing some things out. And I think an MOTD would be fine, with the exception of, I think that you got to be careful about what you put in the MOTD, because you want to give away what's going on while not really what's going on, because you don't want to affect it negatively for someone.
Yeah, well, more so updates of like what has happened already. You know what I mean? Things that are already out there. You don't have to reveal any.
Yeah, well, I think like a
underlying.
generic, like Valmiran's under siege, and things that anyone can see. I mean, you walk by Valmiran at this point, and it's under siege. It's obvious. And maybe you can point out some of the little details, like the knights are on the east gate, the rat men are on the west gate, and there's fire giants at the north gate.
Yeah, which side will you choose? Kind of like prompt people as to how they can get involved.
Yeah, almost like a commercial.
Sure.
Which side will you fall upon?
Make something that's already chaotic even more chaotic.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I think it would do good to at least do something, or at least say, hey, because let's say you roll up a brand new character and you haven't been playing for 2 years, and you may not know what the hell is going on at all. You may not even know there's a plot. I mean, you may think it's just normal for a knight army to be outside of Valmiran because, well, sometimes FL is strange. Shit happens. And so, an MOTD would kind of say, hey, this is what's going on in Valmiran. So at least it gives them an idea that, hey, okay, there's just something actively going on here. How can I get involved?
I think a single line is pretty much all that's needed on the message of the day. It's just Valmiran is under siege, or the sun has disappeared.
Yeah.
Let people know and let them go on from there. Whether or not they care is a different story entirely.
Yeah. Agreed.
Then they can inquire.
Agreed. But I also think that, and we did this a couple times, and I thought it was great. We went on to the forums, and there is because not everyone's going to see the message of the day, right?
Yeah.
And some people complain because they have to do forum interaction, such as posting logs. They have to do a forum interaction for something that they did in game. However, the good thing about it in this way is what we did was we posted kind of like a few paragraphs saying, kind of giving some information out there that, hey, this is going on, and kind of to hype it up a little bit, because not everyone's playing the game that are checking the forums, or not everyone's playing the game that are on the Discord. And so there's things that we can do on the Discord and the forums, and now even if people actually listen to the podcast, we can mention stuff on the podcast as well. And I think maybe it was Rinsvert, I don't know, maybe one of the weirdos, they mentioned something about making announcements on the podcast. That would be kind of cool as well. It would be mainly cool because maybe I'm an ass and I just feel like they should have to wait to hear some of the information, wait for the next podcast to come out, and then we could sell it. Be like on the next podcast.
Yeah, on the next yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Not a bad idea. Now you're thinking.
Sunday.
Yeah, well, it's Thursday.
Yeah, whatever. But you get it. But yeah, anyhow, so I think it's a good idea to do that as well, because you can use the forum to get a little more information without giving too much. And we did that a couple times, and I felt like it had some decent results, but there's no way to really measure that. But yeah, so.
Yeah, Tempurian Road on here, City Under Siege, for example.
Yeah. There's a few of those. Maybe one or two. I don't know. I think we need to do more of those, especially for a plot that's lasting, 3 months, because there's going to be updates. And part of the reason it lasted so long was not because it was actively going on, but it became stale. People would delete their characters, and I wouldn't say it ever there was a point towards the end where it was like, okay, we need to seal this up, because it's hit a point where they're not really going forward with it. There's no one really running with this. There's no one really involved with it, and we need to figure out, kind of get some, drudge up some, interest. But for the most part, it never really had that lull. There's a lot going on all the time. And so, anyhow, I think that would help to kind of keep that interest going, to post those types of things on the forums or the Discord, and also the MOTD, even if it's a single sentence.
Basically what you're saying is the Immortals have various options and avenues in order to keep people posted as to what's happening plot-wise in-game.
Yeah, because not everyone's in-game. So you definitely want to try to reach out to the people and dredge up some interest from people who are not playing.
Right,
And
that'll draw people in.
That's how you suck people back in.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The suck zone, you know.
Especially those that might be on hiatus. That instead of hearing word of mouth or just lurk on the forum, it's like, hey, this plot's going on. Let's see if I can get involved. Yes.
Yeah.
But there's and another problem is there's no way to guarantee that the plot will be covered on every time zone. So how do we rectify that?
So
that's what schedule that comes into play for some of these plots. I mean, you can post it onto a part that most people would get because you're not going to make everybody happy, Wade. And the other bit is asynchronous play, like with the Valmiran plot, to where everybody posted it, and on the weekend, it all updated.
Yeah, you could do that. The thing is whenever you're in the shadow zone or the Wade zone, you basically you have to do the homework, as he likes to put it. Because that's the only way you're going to get these plots moving, really, is to do the homework. And that is either via roleplay log that has to do with the plot of you and another character or multiple characters, journals to forward it, or notes to forward that. So you're going to have to do some writing. And I found that whenever I was involved in a plot, and I don't know if Allie would agree with me on this or not, but whenever I was involved in the plot, I found it a lot easier to write material to forward what I wanted to do. I mean, I know that Allie, as Vestiana, his elf blade master, was like writing these ridiculously long notes. And because there was just so much going on and so much to answer for, I imagine it was probably pretty easy to roll the homework out. Yeah, the homework. So that's just a part of it. As far as these plots are concerned, because you have to have some way to get the information to the immortals to actually have them update it.
Yeah,
and you're going to have to do that in game, by the way. So
if you're posting an RP log, it's not that difficult. You've already written it out. You just replay saves, replay tells, whatever you need to do in order to do that. Copy and then paste the damn thing.
Yeah.
But I know some people don't like even doing that. But if you want to be involved in a plot, this is kind of what you need to do.
Yeah, it's just kind of, unfortunately, it's just the way that it is. You have to do it. It's just the way that the system is going to have to work, and that's all there is to it. If you want to be involved.
Yeah, you got to contribute.
My recommendation is log everything anyway, so this way you're not out. This would also help with when you log in, you can see what date it is and any finer points of a plot that you might have missed. Go back through and take a look.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Well, journals are important anyway because you can really pose more like intimate perspective from your character to the immortals so they can see exactly where you're coming from on a level that might not have been played out well, like live in game. Because sometimes, it can be RPing something and then kind of stumbling what I'm saying or whatever. It might not be the cleanest interaction. Cause sometimes, just brain doesn't work, on the spot. But if I sit down and can think about it and write it out, it'll make more sense that way. That way everybody's kind of clear on intention and everything else like that.
Yeah, we can actually do journals specifically in a different podcast, but yeah, as it relates, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if we're delving down this path a little bit, I will say it's not just for you, though. Or I'm saying it's not just for the immortals. It's also, you can find perspective on your character in writing journals, I think, and I think it attaches you to that character more if you do. I mean, at least for me, if I'm role playing a character and I write these journals, it gives me a perspective of where my character is at and where, how I should act, if you will. It just attaches me to the character more.
Just what how your character grows from the experience rather than writing about the experience itself.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a three-dimensional perspective on the character.
personally, that's how I like to play. But I like
Yeah.
writing as well. Not everyone does, and so
There you go.
Halloween next
Ooh.
week
Yes.
is the Halloween episode.
Tune in next week for the special Halloween edition of the Forsaken podcast. Don't get too scared now. Hey, if you like what's here, click that like button.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Kill Craig.